8 o'clock on winter time. We've recently changed. I'm not sure how to like it, but we'll have to manage. What are we going to do today? I have my screen in front of me because I recently found a bit of code, if it will load. I'll make it easy for myself. I'll just load a new tab. Never enough tabs. So we've got this little bit of code that I saw on a random website that I inspected. And we're gonna add this to HTMH. Yeah, how do we say it? HTML? I guess that's the best name, right? HTMhell. So I'm gonna share that link already for the people that want to know what it's all about. It's in the chat. And I'll start by saying, who am I? My name is Erik, Erik Roes in Dutch. I am a accessibility specialist, accessibility lead. I am responsible for the accessibility of the web components that we use at ING, a large Dutch bank. I am there to make sure that they are accessible, and I do a whole lot of things surrounding accessibility. I do audits, that's where this came up, and I do streaming, and that's what you see right now. And what we are going to do, I found a little bit of code on codepen. No, I didn't find it on codepen, I put it on codepen. I find it somewhere else. I put it on codepen. And now we're going to add it to a website. So we have many windows, many tabs. I guess we have to start HTML. I can just quote it, so that's easy. A collection of bad practices in HTML copied from real websites. So I've contributed to this before because it has some really nice bad stuff. And it's a great learning experience for a lot of people. So, yes, what shall we take as an example? They have all these pieces of code on their website. Some are big, some are small. And let me take a really small one, the good old div link. So I'm going to click this one. It says the good old div link. I can even zoom in a bit. It's an example added by Manuel. That's the person who also initiated this, and I hope he will be with us next week to talk about it some more. And here is the whole bit of good bad code. So the bad code, it's a div that says about us, but it's not just any div. It has a on-click event and an href somehow. And then there is another div. These are all, as it says below, variations of a pattern where an element other than a link, an A element, an anchor, is used to link to a page. So what are the issues and how to fix them? The div element is an element of last resort for when no other element is suitable. Use of the div element instead of more appropriate elements leads to poor accessibility. What is this all about? When you look at HTML, they're all types of elements. And all these elements, or most of them at least, have a semantic meaning. This means that if you use, for example, what shall we take as an example, a list with list items. By using this element, you're saying, hey, it is my intent to create something that communicates that it is a list. I guess that's a pretty accurate description. That's about semantics. So if you use a list element, you say, hey, this is a list. And I want to show everybody that it's a list, and it should look like a list, and it should act like a list. I define this thing to be a list. And if you, for example, use a screen reader, a piece of assistive technology that reads what's on your screen, it can acknowledge that it's a list. It can look at this list. Hey, thanks for joining. A screen reader can notice this list and say, hey, this is a list this should have list items. I know how to announce this list, and it's basically acting on the semantics of the element. So what is basically said here is that there are a lot of elements in HTML that have semantics. It's an extra value that you can add to your code. It shows the intent of your code. But if there is no intent, if there is no clear value that you can add, then one of the last resort items is the div, because it has no semantic value. It's just a container item that does nothing. Another one is span. Span has a slightly different way of displaying, but they are very comparable in many ways. So it's a last resort. A click event on a div triggers only on click. A click event on an anchor, triggers on click and if the user presses the enter key. Yeah, that's very important. So if you use an actual anchor, a link to link to a page, your intent is to link, so you communicate, hey, I'm using a link, then it should also act on keyword events like an enter. Another issue is that a div isn't keyword focusable. So by itself, if you use your keyboard to navigate your page, a div will not be found. It will not be accessed. It will not be focused, nothing. That's what happens when you have a link, but not when you have a div. And the context menu on right click doesn't provide options like open in a new tab or window and bookmark this link. I find there's a lot of value in that. I can show you here. Probably this is a link. I cannot enlarge this, but it says open link in new tab, open in new window, or maybe in a new private window. You can bookmark it, you can save it, you can copy the link location. There's also all these kinds of things that you can do with a link that you cannot do with a div. So the moment that you use something else than the element that's intended to be used, you're going to lose some value. You're trying to reinvent the wheel. And by default, screen readers just announce the text in a div, e.g. about us, in a proper link. Oh yeah, so interpunction. By default, screen readers just announce the text in a div, in a proper link, so like an anchor. A screen reader announces the text and the role. So when you navigate with a screen reader and you approach a div, it will say about us. But if it's a link, it will say about us link, because it will not just say the name of the element, but also the role of the element. And as div has no semantics, it also has no role to announce. So that's a big difference as well. People know where they are and what they can do. And a lot of attributes like aria label might not work properly on div elements. So there's not much support for anything on a div. Screen reader users may use a shortcut to list all links in a page, and these div links wouldn't be listed unless they have a role of link. So if you just have a div with an on-click, and people would say, hey, what are the links on this page? Then you would have an issue because it would not be found. So this is an example of what we can find on HTML. Then you get an example of good code, in this case with the actual anchor element and an href element. Yeah, also simple 3 lines, just like the previous. So that's basically the structure that we see on HTML. So you have an issue that has a title. You get some bad code. You have a list of the issues and how to fix them, and you have an example of good code. So you learn what is wrong, how you can improve it. And they're all shared. And what's the good part is it's on GitHub, which means that everybody can contribute and that you can add your own findings, which is often interesting. So we're gonna, well, it's GitHub. So the first thing we do is we have to fork it. So we are still now in the original repository. I'll enlarge it a bit. And we press fork. I said fork. Oh yeah, I've already forked it. So it's already here. So, and then I get like a copy in my own little bit of GitHub. And it's pretty much exactly the same as the original, except that it's mine. That's basically it. So I say code, clone, and I press this little copy thing. I get the URL of this Git repository. Then I open a terminal and I say git clone, and I paste the link that we just got, and I only paste it once, not twice like I just did. You can blame my motor skills for that. So I say git clone, and then it's creating this folder. And I do cd HTML, and I have to watch my caps, otherwise it will not autocomplete. And in this folder, we have the same files that we saw in GitHub itself. So it's the license, it's the README file, the gulp file, the package.json, all these. And I say code space and dot, and now it should open in VS Code. Oh, and it's actually downloading stuff because I haven't done this in a while. Good. So, and now we have in VS Code this same repository that we saw online, but it's now our copy, and this is the one we can change. So we forked it, and now we can install dependencies. That's what it says. So I'm going to open the terminal inside VS Code. We don't need the other one anymore, and I run npm install. That's going to install some packages, not many, because this is a static site and it's pretty light. I've done it before. So we can already see what kind of files we have. We have the 11t folder, which has the filters, and here there's hell with a folder named entries. And there's a whole list of entries. We're going to create a new markdown file there. So what can we do? I'm just going to take a random one, and I'm going to say right click, copy and paste. So that's always the best part of being a developer. You have to copy and paste stuff. Meanwhile, it's installing. I'm going to go back to the website, HTMhell. It says we need to create number 23. So I'm going to change this. I'm also going to change this. And now we're going to see the piece of code that I actually had on CodePen, because it was rather interesting and there were a few things. I'm not going to mention everything yet, but we need to find a title for this. So what we had was an article with a div with an SRonly class and an image inside. And then there was a div with a span and a text. And then was a sort of body text. This was more like a heading. And then there's a link, which does use the link element, the anchor element that we mentioned. And it said read more. And there was an SVG in there. This sort of chevron. So what are we actually looking at? I guess a good way to say it is a card pattern, because that's basically what we're seeing here. I'm not gonna do the teaser text yet. We can add that when we're done. And we have to put in a date. So it's, what is it, the 12th? 12th today? 12th of November. Yeah, it's all about the copy and paste, right? And the read more link that couldn't. Yeah, it's actually, I'll talk about it later, but the read more link is, it's good. It's a good one. It's a good link. So I'm going to say November. Wait. Yeah, double checking if I didn't forget anything. 12th. And let's say we finish this at around 9 o'clock or something. I don't know. Permalink. I don't think we have to change that. Oh, I did one before, so maybe I have an oh, I have to check the instructions for this part. Okay. So there's a data folder with authors. I think I added something before, so I should be in there, right? Data authors. I'm just gonna search for Eric. Yeah, there it is. My ID is Eric. I feel recognized. So here I say author Eric. And then we're gonna add the bad code. Yeah, we can just copy paste that. So this is the bad code. So I'm copying the code from CodePen, putting in here bad code. this should work. And that's just the HTML. Then I can even add some bad code CSS. We've got that in here as well because we did two things in the CSS. There was an SRonly class. What is an SRonly class? It stands for screen reader only. So the idea is that you have a class that visually hides a text, but it's still in the code available for example, screen readers. You often see other names for this class as well, like visually hidden. They all do the same thing. They make sure that something is really tiny and they position it off the screen and you don't see it. And that fixes everything, at least for assistive technology. So it's visually hidden, but still there in the code. That's a class that we needed, and I made the SVG a bit smaller, because if I don't do this, does it change automatically? Yeah, see, then you get this mega SVG. I don't think we need that. So for readability reasons, I made it a bit simpler. So I'm gonna put that in the bad code CSS. Editing this little piece of the file. We don't need a bad code 2. And no bad code 3. Certainly not bad code 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 or 8. Okay, that's the example I picked. So I'm gonna erase these. Yeah. Motor skills. Just erasing all the stuff that we don't need. Copy paste development. So what we have now is some bad code that we'll dive into and write some stuff about. Then we have bad code CSS, stuff to support the bad code. And then the good code will follow later. That's going to be the conclusion. And I'm going to remove all the other stuff that's also classified as good code. And this is good. Oh, I really took the wrong example to work with because there's a lot of pieces of code within one article. I'm just going to check for a second the button link. That's just good code, bad code. Yeah, I'm going to copy this one. Just because this is simpler and we don't want to have too much noise. Because this one handles like, I don't know, 11 patterns or something. Yay, all the stuff. Okay, much better. So I'm gonna show you a preview. I think I can open a preview. Yeah, so we've got bad code. It's gonna be prettified. Our static site generator does that. It's all code stuff that happens later. Issues and how to fix them. We're gonna put our own stuff here. And then the good code. So it's really pretty straightforward. So we have the bad code now. And we're gonna go through it and make notes of what is bad about it? What can we improve? So this is like a card element, and it can re-render now, so we can actually see what we have. The first thing that stood out for me was this article element. Let's see if we can find a definition. One old school resource, sort of, is the HTML5 doctor. Not always correct. You know what? We use MDN for this. I think that's a bit more solid. It might even link to HTML5 doctor. I don't know. So they use an article element, which is rather interesting because it starts with it. And the only thing that's contained inside the article element is a text that's visually hidden and an image with an alt text. So the HTML article element represents a self-contained composition in a document, page, application, or site. Well, it's not really. What it's basically saying is whatever you put in an article, it's sort of standalone. It has its own value. Yeah. An image with a piece of text is not its standalone own value content. So it's kind of weird. This could actually be a div. Or you could say I wrap the whole thing, including further text. but just wrapping the image in an article, it's weird. So I'm just gonna put that as our first issue. The example code uses an article. So this creates our nice little tag. See, it marks it up. It's a little bit of markdown to make it yeah, like's been said in the chat, it's not an article, it's more like a section or a site. As this is pretty generic, I'm gonna go with section, I think, because it's not really standalone. So the example code uses an article. This element is meant for standalone. Oh, here's where I'm gonna cheat a little, also copy paste. Sometimes I just paste words into Google to see if I spell them correctly. Google is like spell check deluxe. And in this case, I'm gonna follow the definition of a dictionary. I think that's a good one to go with. And then the second says it differently. So my conclusion is it's all good. I think it's all good. We're gonna keep it like this. If anybody wants to change it, we'll find out later. So we go back to VS Code. This element is meant for standalone content that can be reused by itself. If there is anything reusable here, it is the entire card. And I'm gonna quote that because it's not really a card. More appropriate is a section, because a section is also a clear part of the page. Maybe it's even mentioned here. Section, of course. But it's not a link. Section is in the left side on the menu. Yeah, it's a standalone section which doesn't have a more semantic specific meaning element to represent it, contained within an HTML document. Typically, but not always, sections have a heading. Yeah, so it's a standalone section, but not an article. So like when you have a blog page, for example, you often have some kind of header. You know, that's where your menu is and your hero image and whatever you want to have. Then you have the main. This is where you have your main content, the most important part. And within the main, you could have an article. And the article is the actual blog post. And this blog post could have several sections. And a card like this, let's say the article could have been maybe the part with all the cards. But a card is often more like a section than an article. Oh, here is even a nice note. If the content of the element would make sense syndicated as a standalone piece, the article may be a better choice. Yeah, this is not logical. Like if you had an RSS feed or something of a website, and this card would pop up as its own piece of syndicated content. That's how I try to imagine it sometimes. It would not make sense. Like an entire blog post, that's an article. You want that in your RSS feed. But just a card, that's not reusable, and certainly not with just an image in it as we see it right now. I think I can also add links. Let me check. Just saw the div button. Didn't it have links at the end? Like some sort of resources section or something. We have to follow the format of the site, and everything we don't know, we just follow from other examples. Copy paste. Oh, here. Resources. I think that's nice. Oh, but this is... Here's the good code /div, and then there's a section. And the section says resources. Is that good? It's not that I'm now copying the example or something. No, I think this is fine. I'm gonna make sure. Yeah, so I think we can add this. Oh, I'm not even sure. So we have a div classes section with some good code. Yeah. But why are these marks here? What do they close? I see these little markdown, bits of markdown. Where do they come from? I'm gonna assume this is a typo. I'm not sure why this is here. So I'm just gonna add another div below. So I think we have to do it like this. And then what do I add? This one, this link, the section element. Is it titled? Yeah, the generic section element. The generic, oh, capitalization, of course, section element. I think that's pretty good. So that's the first thing that we notice. This weird ass article. It's just strange. So what's next? Then we go back, and what we then have is a div that says image. So I went through this with my screen reader and it said image, feature teaser, graphic. So it sort of announced superfluously that there was an image, but it's already announced because we just mentioned semantics. This image already tells the browser and therefore the screen reader that it is an image. So the role of the element is already clear. You don't have to add text to say that it is an image because that's implied by using this element. If you add a div with an image, don't do that. Then it might be useful, but then still it would be really strange because there is no relationship between the SRonly div and the one that would contain the image. So you're sort of announcing something, but also not even, there's not even a relationship between the text and what follows. So what here is the image, you don't even know. Well, you do know because it was already clear. So this, you can see it from my expression again. Sometimes code just baffles me, and that's a big challenge when auditing things. You see a website or something, and there's just so much to take in, and sometimes I just don't understand. I don't know why there is a div here with the text image. It's so unnecessary. Probably he thought he would reveal the image to the screen readers that way. Yeah, that would be magic. So you have to declare each image this way to tell screen readers that there are images. Well, that would... Then what is the image tag for? I really don't know. So how are we gonna put this? There is a piece of text. Yeah, and then there's also the alt tag. We're going to talk about that next. That's an interesting piece of work as well. There is a piece of text before the image with the text image. This seems to be some sort of definition of the role of the element following. When using proper is such a nice word. I use it all the time. Semantic HTML. The HTML elements already communicate their semantics. Adding text is superfluous and confusing. It's my second good trick for English. Sometimes I put stuff in Google to see how it's spelled, but there's one word I don't want to spell, and that's unnecessary. It's a complicated word, so I just type superfluous. I think it's a really nice word, and I don't have to think about the spelling. So that's really good. So adding text is superfluous and confusing. It's just such a... it's hard to put in text what actually is wrong here, but it's just so weird. It's so hard to understand that it's makes it hard to explain. Then we get to the image tag. It has an alt, but the alt text is the same as this teaser image. So it doesn't describe what the image is. It says it's a teaser, but it doesn't tease. It's like... it's one of the most confusing alt text I've seen recently. Yeah, the alt text is like even worse than wrong. So let's see if we can put this in text. The alt text states, let's say the alt attribute. The states that the image is a teaser for the function. Function? Was it function? Feature. Feature mentioned below. Yeah, looking for words here because it's just so strange. Adding the text teaser does not make it a teasing image. The visual function of the image does not work in code. In this case, the image adds nothing of a value to the textual content of the card. An empty alt attribute would have hidden the image and made clear that it is decorative. Because basically if you say, hey, this image is about feature A, and then you say, hey, there's an exciting feature called A, then the content is a duplicate. And you don't want to tell the same thing twice, so you can just make the alt empty. And then it is ignored by stuff like screen readers, which is a rather easy way to solve this. And this way, we're also starting to get some good HTML in the end. So I'm going to put this section at the end. So now we've got everything in a section. So this is much more logical. You don't need this SRonly. That also means we don't need the SRonly class in our CSS. See, we're cleaning up here. Accessibility is not hard. It's actually having less code in this case. So that's improving. So, and then there's this card content. And it says exciting feature. This was meant to be a heading. It's good that I can add this text because you cannot see it now, but this was sort of a heading text. There is a span with text. Oh, I can also make this into an element. So we do our markdown tricks again. So we do the backticks and it turns it into a piece of code. There's a span with text. That is meant to be a heading. assistive technology can make use of headings in the code. Depending on how it is nested, this element could be a, I think it was an H3 or H4. I think it was H4 instead. I can make this even more specific. When this card is nested below an H3, this heading could be an H4 instead. Okay, so we also changed that already in this one. H4. Wait, not this one. The other one. Stay sharp. Exciting feature. Then we have this div surrounding a bit of text. Yeah, span should be a header. But the next one, the div. Yeah, I was thinking this is much more logical to be a paragraph. I'm just going to clean this up as well. No superfluous divs and spans. So this might be needed for markup, you know, the div. And maybe this one as well. But there's no need to have another span around your heading. So we're going to clean this up. So the, how do we call this? The main paragraph inside the card is nested or wrapped in a div. No, wait, it was a span, right? No, this was a div, yeah. Using a paragraph would communicate its without the apostrophe, its intentions more clearly. I'm not aware of any actual semantic value of a paragraph. I don't think software really uses it right now, but it's a much more robust solution than putting it inside a div. And if anybody reads your code, it's much more clear. You say, hey, there's a div, probably container. Then there's an H4, then it's a paragraph. It's really clear, like, hey, this is what it is. And then there's this mysterious read more link. What's the issue with read more links? Well, imagine you have a lot of these cards on a page. There are pieces of software, for example, VoiceOver on my MacBook, that can give you a list of all the links on a page. If all the links on a page are called read more, then there is no idea what these links mean or what they do. Let's see, an image inside a link overrides the link text. I don't think we have that issue here. That's a good question. We have this link here, and it's an interactive element. And what's the easy way to show it? Maybe I'm gonna open this one in Chrome just to show you easily accessible name calculation. That just makes things very easy. I'm gonna zoom in on this a bit. And I'm going to this read more link, inspect. So there's this link that links to the feature or a blog post on the feature. And I've got this accessibility tab inside Chrome. And there you can see it calls the link read more. Why? Well, first it tries to look at aria labeled by. If this attribute is present, it will gladly take it for an accessible name. It will name this link based on what is labeled. If there is an aria label on it, let's say the label was feature page, feature blog, it would use this as the accessible name of the link. We have neither of those. So what does it do? It checks the contents. The contents of the link are a span that says read more and an image. So it adds these two together. Let's say this was not an SVG but another image, then it would have combined the two. So let's say some silly person would have called this chevron, then the link would have been called read more chevron, which is nothing, but sure. It just takes the contents of the element and takes it as its accessible name. Then there's also the backup of a title attribute. There's a lot to find on the web about title attributes and accessibility. The added value is pretty much 0. So title attribute, not a very good solution. In this case, it just takes the content, which is read more, which doesn't tell us anything, not visually, not in code. So what can we say? Read more about exiting feature. Exciting. Did I do that right? In the spelling is so hard. Feature teaser. Exiting feature. No, exciting feature. Okay, so back to that. Read more about our exciting feature. It's a bit long, but if that's what it's all about, then oh, we get a reply in the chat as well about paragraphs. Paragraphs can be read by screen readers. When divs are turned into Ps, screen reader users can skip from one paragraph to the next. Yeah, that's a really good one. Especially, of course, this is a really short paragraph, but when you have large articles and it's divided into paragraphs, it's really nice to think, I think I've read enough. I'm going to skip to the next one. It's what we do visually as well when we read a newspaper and you've got this really long piece of text. You think it's getting less and less and less interesting, and you might skip to the last bit or to the next paragraph. And that's something indeed that screen readers can do as well. So that's very nice. So that's the added value of a paragraph. To get back to the link, I've changed the text. Read more about our exciting feature. It could be anything, but just read more is just not enough. There was a span surrounding it. It could be for design reasons. There's always a reason to think of it. The SVG was not bothering me at all. It didn't have an accessible name, but it didn't need to have one either. What we can do, just to make it extra robust, is we say aria hidden is true. So what does that do? This means it hides itself from the accessibility tree. And the accessibility tree, the accessibility API. I see something in the chat. I'm going to get to that in a second. Your browser reads the page. It generates the accessibility tree. So next to your DOM, your HTML structure, there's an accessibility tree. And a screen reader reads this through the accessibility API. And when you put this hidden attribute on there, it will not be put in there. It would be ignored. So what we did previously with the image, and we said we gave it an empty alt. This also means that it's basically ignored. But you also have this attribute that can do the same. But when you can use what is natively there in HTML already, like this alt attribute that you can empty, and otherwise you can always fall back on aria. But that's like a last resort. You shouldn't use it. Then there is stated the SVG should have a role of image. Technically, it's an image, so you can give it a role of image. Then it's being read even better by lots of technology. But because we want to hide it, there's no value in adding this image role. You don't want it pronounced or announced at all, so we hide it. If we did want to give it a name for whatever reason, we could, for example, say, what can we do? You could, for example, wrap it in a span. Give that an aria label of chevron. Caps are not really necessary, but it's automatically when typing. And you give it a role is image. That's a way that you could give this image a name, and then it would be recognized as an image and announced as chevron, and it would be read more about our exciting feature, chevron. No added value there, but just as an example, that's what you could do. I've experimented a bit with this recently. The thing is, SVGs are creative elements. They sort of create their own context. They're in a way comparable to iframes. They can do strange things with browsers. So in my experience, it's often very nice to just say, I will hide the SVG and put the image role on something else. So the browser won't get confused by the SVG because it might. And this is a solid solution for that. It might actually work to just put it on the SVG, but then I would have to test it in browser and screen reader combinations. I think this is a bit more solid to just give you as an example. So I'm just going to remove the span again because it's not part of our good code example. Go away. Yeah. So we have everything. I think this makes a much more workable card. We can fix the indentation in this one. So what did we change? Oh, we still have to add this to our little bit of feedback for HTML, of course. So the last thing we did was we talked about how the paragraph was not wrapped in an actual paragraph element because I don't know. Read more is not a very descriptive link text. It is especially bad when creating when it's in a list with more links with the same text. The user does not know where this link leads. So it's like a double win. If you look at WCAG, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, then you could say, hey, if I just change the accessible name, so I add an area label and I say read more about blah, 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 then you fixed it technically and it helps people with a screen reader. But then visually you would still have all these cards with read more. So let's say you are zoomed in and you don't see the entire card and you just see this read more link and have a paragraph. You still don't know where it leads. So you still lack context. So I'm often a fan more of doing the inclusive design choice, saying, hey, I want to benefit everybody. And in this case, changing the actual link text adds a lot more value than just adding this ARIA label so you can pass WCAG and you get your precious certification or whatever. I'd rather have happy users, but maybe that's just me. I don't know. So read more is not a very descriptive link text. It is especially bad when it's in a list with more links with the same text. The user does not know where this link leads. Yeah, I think this is pretty good. Also because I wrote it myself, that makes it easy. So I'm just going to copy this and I'm going to put it in the good code, bad code, good code, this section. Okay, I just saved it and now I want to sort of preview and I'm going to go back to the repository and we only added one resource in the end. So I'm just going to store it. Maybe later I can add the recording of this. I'm going to check the repository, the README. What did it say? So run the project npm run start. We typed that in our console, npm run start. So that's the start script that now does something. Things go moving and we now have a site on local host. And there it is. This is what we just did. We now have an example of what we want. Number 23, a card pattern submitted on November 12th. That's today by Eric. That's me. So far, so good. And then the bad code. Article, div SRonly, image with an alt. This weird span that should have been adding. This paragraph that's not a paragraph, the read more link that doesn't do anything descriptive. And then we say details on how to fix, and we say a card pattern, and there you have the bad code. And there you have the issues and how to fix them. That's exactly how we want it, with the nice flames and everything. So we found 6 issues in this. You think it's a small piece of code, like a card, how hard can it be? But there's enough. And then you have the good code, and you have the resources. So I think we've added pretty much what we like. Then there's another instruction. It says npm run screenshots. So I'm gonna press Control C to stop hosting this, and I say npm run screenshot, and there's another script that's gonna run that creates a screenshot of it all. And then I have to push it. So I say git status. And it indeed says that there are multiple files changed. Oh wait, we still have our file name to change. It's now called close buttons copy. But the idea was to call it rename. Where are you? 23-card pattern.md. Oh, that's automatically MD. So that's the name of our file. And we had this description that we had to fill in. Good code, bad code. Don't we need to add this description? There was something in the top, right? Oh, apparently we don't need to. Oh, good. Minimal is better. So I think this is it. If I missed anything, let me know. Gamers always say that you should not do... you should not give them any hints about what they're doing, but please, I'm coding. Help. Git status, we do it again. And now it says we modified some sort of script file. That's probably part of the whole screenshot thing, I don't know. And we modified this entry. And I say git add all files. Git commit, what's going to be the message. I'm just going to check the original repository again, see what other people use as a commit message, just to keep it a bit in check. I like following examples. Add entry 22 div link. That was what he did himself, so we're going to do something likewise. Add entry 23 card pattern. That's going to be our commit message. So if people are going to see changes later on in whatever, then this is what's going to be labeled. And we're going to say git push. And then it's going to say, hey, but you... Oh, it's pushing right away. That's easy. So then we go to my repository. That's one page back. Gonna refresh. And it says, this branch is one commit ahead of Matuzo master, and I can make a pull request. Then it's easy again. I'm gonna check other pull requests and see what people say. It's all copy paste. So as a title, I'm just gonna copy Nick here. Nick has useful stuff to say, so we say there's the whole div. I'm not gonna read it again. Okay, so we're just gonna say, hey, the base repository is the one by Matuzo, the head repository is my own. I want to create a pull request. There's a big button here. Yeah, I think this is a perfectly fine title. And I'm going to copy next text, added a contribution with interesting use of a card. So it says 2 files changed. I'm going to create the pull request, and I think that should be it. So now we've put this pull request on the repository. It already says all checks have... Oh, it said all checks have passed. Let's see what happens. So it's doing some checks. And then if Manuel likes it, he can press a big button and say merge this. And then probably automatically a build is going to run, which means all these scripts come into action and they generate a new page. So right now, the most recent piece is number 21, the good old div link. And if Manuel approves of my entry, then we're going to have a new entry. And it will be automatically updated. It's still checking some stuff. It already got linted, which is nice. How long is this going to take? Is this something we can wait for? I have no idea. You know what? We did what we could. I'm just going to put this pull request in the chat as well. It's number 68. And we can keep track. I can also give you the Twitter account of HTMhell. I say follow it. I think it's a lot of fun. It's been a bit quiet recently, but it's only quiet because we don't add anything. I think it's nice if everybody could contribute. The more that we contribute, the more interesting the site becomes. So we go back to our pull requests. We see 2 more green checks. No mixed content detected. 2 redirect rules processed. 9 new files uploaded. It says all checks have passed. So that's good. I think we've made our commit. We've done some coding on screen. I think that's always a good thing to try. As you all saw, it's mostly copy-paste, but thinking about the text. And I hope next week that we have Manuel as a guest and we can talk about HTML and maybe has some feedback on this specific example or HTML in general. It would be nice if somebody else contributed as well and we can talk about it and say, hey, what do we see? Do we agree? What do we learn? But for now, this is it. I want to thank you all very much. I very much enjoyed adding this. I was looking forward to adding this. I wanted to do it last week, but I didn't feel too well, so I'm glad I did it today. And I hope you all join me again next week and we take another step. My pleasure. Good night.